In other words, it was a schema. It was an evening, roughly 5 days later. Krishna was talking to me in the B Club room at the university. Or rather, a reverse schema. That house makes people uneasy. Krishna and I were facing each other in the room under the light from a pretty dawn. The house makes people uneasy? I repeated like a fool, and Krishna nodded. In the past, Ikagabuchi investigated similar places too. The structure of the building causes changes in the human psyche toward anxiety. There were actually a number of them around the world. Some of them turn into murder scenes, and others turn the people within them into criminals. There's no actual scientific proof for the relation, but I'm of the opinion that they exist. People's minds, after all, are hazy things that you can easily manipulate into leaning one way or another. Wait a second, what exactly do you mean? Basically, that building wasn't built for people. I felt something like a cold hand gripping my heart. I'll avoid saying the name here, but the architect of that building had actually received architecture awards during his time in university. People had high expectations of him. Krishna was illuminated by golden sunlight, and her straight black hair glittered as she spoke in remembrance. He was supposedly a very serious person, maybe too serious. He was the type of person that wondered what buildings are, and he would lose sleep pondering that. He loved the joyful faces of the landlords so much and worked and worked. However, he realized the futility that arose when one person asked him for another design, as he saw the house that he put blood and soul into would be demolished in the name of renovation. Families changed, preferences changed. It's unavoidable as long as you're living, but he couldn't take it. If you take care of it while living, it would last over 100 years. Sometimes people should suit themselves with the house. He left these words and is said to have vanished from his atelier one day. His family put out a search request, but no one could ever find him, and some years later he was effectively declared dead. That was over 30 years ago. That atelier was his final work, and had at some point been dubbed the house that grants wishes. Krishna pointed out the third-floor window towards the residential district. This country tossed aside countless traditions along with its Meiji-era cultural revolution. I'm of the opinion that one of those traditions was the house. Tiled roofs became scarcer over the years, and buildings that housed several generations became rare. Mass production, mass consumption, that was the era we'd entered. We weren't inheriting treasures anymore, believing instead that you could reset life every few decades. After all, that sufficed for supply and demand. But I think things were more important to the people of this country that faded away more and more. After I heard her words, I thought. My father was saying the same. It takes 30 years to grow a single sturdy tree, and yet the Japanese lumber industry found itself in danger of going out of business in the face of cheap lumber being imported. It wasn't that he was worried over his job. He was afraid that the idea that you could get an unlimited amount of cheap wood would become ingrained in the minds of people of this country. In the past, people would pray to the gods of forests, would cut trees while offering thanks, and carefully built houses with them. Whenever they were rebuilding, they carefully tried to reuse wood whenever possible. Even on this earthquake-riddled island, Horyuji had remained standing for 1,000 years. The skill of the carpenters who understood the finest details and characteristics of the wood in the day were, of course, amazing, but they also said that the graciousness towards the important offerings of nature was just as important. I always agonized over having been born into a family whose business dealt with lumber. Did I take care of buildings as I grew up? Did I ever think about the feelings of those who created the building? I was filled with emotions as I wondered if a day would ever arrive and that his wish would ever come true within this grand city where every day you could see the sights of reform and reconstruction. According to Krishna, everything originated from the design of that house, which contained the intent of the architect. When an architectural friend of Krishna took a look, they noted that while it looked simple, it used extremely high-level techniques. They said that the groaning of the house was to give it durability against hurricanes and earthquakes, along with a bit of playfulness to deliberately make it groan. The meaningful space under the stairs, the center point of a sturdily built house. The kitchen, which gets abused the most, was deliberately omitted. The living quarters were deliberately designed to interfere with the daily routine. It was certainly a house constructed for durability. Krishna mumbled as she pushed her red-framed glasses up. Normally, houses should revolve around its inhabitants, but not in this case. People naturally begin to feel like the house is built for something other than themselves, and that was enough to psychologically rattle people. So what happens when a boy who just recently come to Tokyo, who has no friends, decides to live there? So in other words, it had nothing to do with ghosts? Indeed, you're much more mentally fatigued than you probably realize, having moved to the city alone. You may have felt fear at first, but you probably tolerated it. But eventually you reach a limit, and then what do people do? Krishna looked at me with her big eyes. They create a reason for escaping from fear. Creating a reason? Yes, they create a reason for the sounds. In other words, you were subconsciously carving numbers into the walls of the house at night. But I was speechless, and Krishna leaned closer. Think about it, Nagi. Where does fear come from? It comes from the unknown. That's why people learn. They research inexplicable things to escape from fear. Perhaps people's knowledge was born from the effort devoted to escaping from fear. Cooking developed out of the fear of starvation, clothing developed out of fear of external temperature, and buildings and weapons developed out of fear of enemies. Everything began from human fears. You thought there was an inexplicable sound at night. However, no matter how much you searched the house, you couldn't find a reason for the sound. Of course, you'd have to know that the house was deliberately designed to make sounds, but you had no way of knowing. Then what do? You were cornered, so you created a reason for the sounds. In other words, a reverse schema. Is that even possible? No, it had to be. Otherwise, how would the number 4 have been carved into the back of a shoe I'd been wearing all along? I was wearing it, so it had to have been me. My lower body was trembling. It terrified me, the other self that acted irrespective of my own will. Or rather, that I didn't understand myself. Well, Krishna sat back down and sighed. It was partly my fault for leaving a building like that alone, even though I knew it existed right near me. Sorry, she said as she bowed her head, which flustered me. No, stop that. It all started with me being greedy because I wanted to skimp on living expenses and didn't immediately move out. Please raise your head, I frantically said. It was your fault, she nodded. There are no shortcuts for granting wishes. I could give no retort and just groaned. However, I realized that there was one question that hadn't been answered. Wait, then why were the numbers counting down? And then Krishna shook her head, saying, Who knows? You don't know? I asked, and for some reason her big eyes glimmered with amusement. I don't know, but I think you probably carved a cross on the wall. A cross, not 7? Right, the number 10. It's possible that it might not have been meant to be a number to begin with. Probably didn't matter to you. Your fear was alleviated by carving anything into the wall to act as the source of the sounds. However, this is why the incident came forth, a little bit of coincidence. On the place you carved, there was from the start, out of pure coincidence, a scratch. Subconsciously, you remembered where you carved 10, yet when you woke up, it combined with the original scratch to create 7. And that was what gave birth to something else inside you, a ghost. So that's why I felt an incredible amount of anxiety when I first saw that number. The feeling of having encountered something far beyond my threshold that I cannot reason out. After that, you continued carving letters into the wall in accordance to the sound you heard after sleeping. The countdown was probably because of your subconscious desire. If the numbers went up, it would continue forever. You're probably hoping that it would eventually stop. After that, Krishna had a bit of a mischievous look. But you're quite simple. If the countdown ended, you may have ended your life. I'm glad we made it on time. And with that, she showed me a soft smile for the first time. Alright, if you've had enough of this, don't enter the world of ghosts out of curiosity. And as with living people, pay respect to all existences. That's the main motto of Ikagabuchi after all. Now the Krishna who said that with complete seriousness matched the imagine I've had of the Krishna the person. Although she had a more moe character appearance than a big brother or father. And with that, the complex tangled thread had been solved. According to Krishna, she'd realized that the building caused anxiety in the psyche of its inhabitants the moment I'd made my first post. In an effort to keep it under wraps, she had left it in Karasu's hands. But Karasu was pretty careless to begin with and then became drunk, so the important message had not gotten across to me, which is why things had escalated to this point. In any case, everything was solved, so that was good. I'll give you a warning though. As I was leaving the house, Krishna had told me, "You don't seem to have much tolerance for this area. Maybe I shouldn't be saying it as an administrator for an occult site, but you shouldn't delve into the occult genre too much. Find friends in Tokyo with whom you could bond, get a girlfriend, and construct a proper, solid identity while you dabble in the occult as a hobby. That's the right way to do it. Especially, avoid that girl named Yoichi." Which sounded about right. As Krishna said, Yoichi was abnormal. She was, to put it frankly, like your feet were planted firmly on the other side. That was probably why those urban legends popped up over her odd level of concentration on the paranormal. The sunset was extremely beautiful as I stepped out of the west wing. The clear orange color shone straight to my soul. Dang. I'd become easily moved by this incident and almost came to tears just out of graciousness towards peacefulness. I hung on, rolling myself against crying. There were a lot of students about, and a feeder high school was just on the other side of the gate to the west wing. There were a number of high school girls going home too. I didn't want to embarrass myself as a university student. But then, I realized one of them was staring at me. Her black hair was pretty, and she had white skin, and she was slender. Her uniform figure was blinding, and just by standing, she looked like she was from a different world. Wait, what? I eventually realized that I recognized that girl and couldn't restrain myself from running to her. "Wait, are you Yoichi?" And then that girl turned her glass bead-like eyes to me. "Oh, you." Her sleepy response made me realize she wasn't looking at me. Yoichi was wearing a school uniform, and perhaps as a fault of her looks stood out. Even in such an appearance, she seemed distant from daily life. "Hey, what a coincidence. You attend our feeder school? What year are you?" I spoke to her with a full smile. "That has nothing to do with you." Yoichi's response was quite cold. There was none of her bedazzled, vitality-filled look anymore that she had when looking upon the paranormal. "I hadn't come to school in a while, and I shouldn't have come at all," she said with annoyance, and I noticed she didn't have the sharp smell from before. It seemed she'd taken a bath. Glossy hair, an ironed white blouse, a black tie. I narrowed my eyes as I glazed at the contrast from before and said, "Pretty good." "What is?" "Your looks. You look more clean, and your uniform suits you." However, Yoichi turned her back to me, saying I was pathetic. I intended to praise her, but apparently it just annoyed her. "If it's nothing, I'm going." She turned on her heel, and I hurriedly stopped her. "You were staring over there, did you want something from Krishna?" Krishna. She seemed to react to that word as life seemed to return to her glass beads. "I see. Ikagabuchi is here." Her response to the occult was pretty good. I felt like I was being driven mad as I continued talking in that direction. "I'm indebted to you a bit too. I heard all about that house. I didn't know there were things like subconscious confusion over a building. And I freaked out a bit when I learned the truth. I was probably on a high from having been released from my fears. I kept talking. I talked on and on. Everything I'd heard from Krishna, the truth about the incident, about the architecture of the house, about the will of the architect, and even about the problems of contemporary Japan. However, Yoichi didn't react at all. Without even glancing at me, she said, "That's good," and continued walking without any trace of emotion. That made me feel a bit lonely, so I chased after her, bothered by her body language. "What is it? You seem pretty depressed. Is there anything else on your mind?" And when I said that, I remembered. Come to think of it, that day she sat at that house. Have you noticed? Right, what did she notice at the time? I asked her and she stopped, and then she slowly turned around and asked back. Do you really want to hear? I felt like those cold black eyes would swallow me, and I heard something inside me urging me to stop. That I shouldn't learn anymore, it warned. You can still turn back, said Yoichi. You know what they say. If you peer from this side, they can see you too. Krishna had said that as well, and I felt goosebumps. But I wonder why. That moment, I had a bizarre sense of excitement. That I wanted to see the world as she viewed it. That I wanted to stand where she stood. That I wanted to know why her words always seemed to sway my world. I'll listen. Tell me. When I said that, I was seeing things. Was I seeing things, or did Yoichi seem to have a slightly forlorn look? However, I would realize later that this was a fork. A story about waiting in the bizarre and grotesque, helpless darkness of a man. The boundary between that world and this world. The journey around the Ikaikabuchi began at this moment. After a moment, Yoichi nodded and then began speaking. I was always wondering, what was it called, the house? Why was it called the House that Grants Wishes? Why? Because the title lacks a subject. Whose wish? And those words gave me chills, and I immediately began regretting my decision. That house isn't a house of hope. I just felt an incredible source of malice. Yoichi whispered, with the expression of a queen who'd been locked away in a dark castle for 1,000 years. The architect that had disappeared while blowing strange buildings. The countdown that began with 7. The mysterious space under the stairs. The house that grants wishes. There's a single answer that ties everything together. My goosebumps wouldn't go away. What was she trying to say? What was about to show itself? The girl Yoichi's dark eyes glimmered as she spoke. The architect is still inside those stairs. Wait. Of course, he isn't alive. Then everything ties together. Why there's a meaningless space under the stairs, why it became named the House that Grants Wishes, and why the numbers began with 7. Wait, it doesn't explain anything. It didn't start from 7 because it was originally 10 and I had to just coincidentally write it wrong. Words twisted my world. You originally wrote 10, you're right to that point. But there was never a scratch to begin with. Someone added a scratch and changed it to 7. Why? Why can you say that? I saw. What? That on top of your 10, someone added a scratch to make it a 7. Then when Krishna said that there was no ghost in that house, and then Yoichi looked in the direction of the west wing with sadness. There's no better fortune than living with bliss. Huh. That is that person's kindness and what I lack. I was going to go mad if I didn't laugh. You're lying, aren't you? You're making all this up, aren't you? Or it's that in a occult story you read somewhere. I laughed, praying that that was the case. Yoichi gave me a sympathizing look, a grieving look. Everything's the truth, because... I could no longer respond, and Yoichi quietly landed the final blow. When you were carried out, some man I'd never seen before was clicking his tongue on the stairs. As the world spun around me, Yoichi's cold, sweet voice reverberated. Welcome to the world on this side. Yeah, so short and sweet and really scary and lots of layers of mystery. I love this. You can get this free. This is kind of like the demo version of a full thing. I think it's a trilogy. And this is the only part that's translated, unfortunately. I really wish that we could get the all of it. Maybe one day we will. They've been translating a bunch of games from Nitro Plus, yes. They also did Song of Saya and what's the other one called? I forget. Demon Bane. And there's a few others that, if you're into visual novels, you might have heard of, but yeah, this is... They do a really good job at using visuals to get the scares, because what else are they gonna do? Something about the colors too. The color palette is like really like vivid and like sharply contrasting, because when you're kind of in the normal world, for lack of a better term, it's kind of bland and like brown gray, and when scary things happen, it's like greens and reds, and then the sound goes all like terrifying. Okay, thanks, Sekaisha. So yeah, here's an ad. Please support the official release. I'll leave a link in the description for the video where you can get the pre-translated version of the English version. Oh yeah, Yoshitoshi Abe did the character design. He did a bunch of anime: Serial Experiments Lane, Text No Lies, Hibane Renmei. I'm not sure what the writer did. I don't think he did a whole lot. I don't recognize that name. But yeah. I'd love to have a full English translation for this. I would pay some money for that.